Hey everybody, Charlie Craig here, and I want to say welcome to the Life His Way podcast. On this podcast, I simply want to share some biblical principles to help us apply the Bible to our everyday lives and do life His way, life God's way. So, over the next few weeks, I'm going to do about 8 to 10 episodes and release it every Monday morning. And over these next few episodes, I'm going to take the topic of persecution or bullying, basically being treated negatively because of what we believe, because we're followers of Jesus Christ. We're going to take that topic over the next few weeks and just talk about it and give some advice on how to deal with it in a godly way, from a godly Christian perspective. So let's tune in over these next few weeks and see what we can learn. And I look forward to releasing this every Monday morning over the next 8 to 10 weeks. Join in, it's going to be some good content, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to stay consistent with it and be able to build an audience and just be a blessing to you. So today is January 1st, 2024. So happy New Year, and thanks for tuning in. I want to talk about the topic of persecution, what it means to be persecuted. This is the definition that I found. I just want to read to you. It says persecution is defined as hostility and ill treatment of an individual or group of people by another individual or group. And the common forms are religious persecution, political persecution, and racism. So persecution or bullying or just cruelty in general are common behaviors, but even though they're common, I believe that they are also unacceptable. These behaviors are generally frowned upon, but the truth of the matter is, with the climate of our nation and the climate of our culture set by our leaders and influencers who build their platforms off of extremity and outrage, the same culture that's screaming to be kind is also the same culture that's building platforms off of harshness, off of just meanness and rudeness, and building their platforms off of sometimes the idea of persecuting others because they believe differently than they do. And the truth is that as Christ followers, we're called and commanded to be different and to react different than culture. But the sad truth is that oftentimes we find ourselves responding and acting in the same kind of way of persecuting others because they believe or think differently than we do. Now, life as a believer is rewarding, but it's also challenging. The Bible tells us that we're going to be on the receiving end of persecution. But the Bible also tells us that we are not to retaliate in the same kind of way. Others may take the low road, but that's not a journey that we're wanting to participate in. We're called to do things different. We're called to take the high road and to do life God's way. So with that being said, I want to take the next few weeks and just talk about 9 different ways that we are called to respond to persecution because of our faith as believers. Now, I do mention this quite a few times over the next few weeks and over the next few points, but don't expect for this to be a just pray about it type of response or just forgive and forget type of perspective. That is part of it, but that's not the whole picture. I want to take this and be both very practical about responding to persecution, but also take those spiritual aspects that come from the Bible and honor that as well, and be specific about how we can be obedient to what Jesus commands us to do concerning persecution. So it isn't just going to be a just pray about it or forgive and forget type of gaslighting situation, but we're going to be practical about this and see how we can put that into practice in a practical way over these next 9 ideas and next 9 different ways that we respond to persecution. I'm just going to tackle one of them today. And I want to be sure to mention this early on, that persecution here in America looks a lot different than what persecution looks like in, say, Pakistan or North Korea. That the extremity of persecution is different here, but it's still painful. And just because our lives and our livelihood may not be on the line doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us, doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. And I want to honor the fact that there are Christians across the world who are being put to death, or being put in prison, or being tortured because of their faith. And we're not experiencing that here in America, but the type of persecution that we do experience and the type of bullying that we do experience, it does weigh on us. And it does matter. And we do have to talk about it. And I'm going to talk about those extremities later on in this series that I'm doing on persecution. But for the bulk of it, and right now, we're going to talk about what it means to be persecuted in our context in a Western culture. And we honor what's happening around the world, but it looks different for us. And we respond different. And there are rights that we do have here in America that make it possible for us to worship freely and be who we are without having our lives put on the line or our livelihood put on the line. So we're going to talk about it from that perspective. And the first thing that I want to talk about, here's my first point, and I'm going to talk about this today and then share some others next week, is number one, expect it. Expect to be persecuted. All throughout the Bible and all throughout the New Testament especially, and all throughout Jesus' teaching, Jesus tells us that we should be expected to be persecuted and to be treated differently in a negative way because of our faith in Him. And here's the thing. When you know that the shots are coming your way, when you know that something's going to be against you, it eliminates the element of surprise. And even though it hurts and even though it doesn't feel good when you're going through it, you know to expect it, so it takes that sting of being surprised away. This is what it says in John 15, verses 18 through 20. Jesus speaking, and He says this, "If the world hates you, remember that it hated me first." Jesus says, if the world hates you, and it will, remember that it hated me first. The world would love you if you were one of its own, if you belong to it. But you are no longer part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, and therefore it hates you. And since they persecuted me, Jesus speaking, naturally they will persecute you. Jesus tells us to expect it. Jesus tells us that, hey, you're going to be persecuted, you're going to be bullied, you're going to be treated differently in a negative way because of your faith in me. Those are Jesus' words to His disciples. Those are His words to us as His followers. If we were part of this world, then the world would accept us. The world would embrace us. The world would affirm us. The world would listen to us. But because we belong to Christ and we're not of this world anymore, we should expect people in this world to reject us and to treat us differently. It's a hard truth. It's hard, but it's true. And this is why Christian community and love for other Christians is important. This is why I always say that we cannot do life alone. This is why I always say that the value of our lives, the growth in our lives, the perspective that we have, all of that is going to be in the context of relationship. If we isolate ourselves and we're experiencing this all by ourselves, then it makes us weaker. It makes us become more discouraged. It makes us want to quit and give up and just throw in the towel and say, forget all of this. I'm just going to go about doing life my own way and blend in and be like everyone else. And that's not what God has called us to do. We have to value Christian community and being a part of that and having brothers and sisters in Christ who are encouraging us, who are battling alongside us, and who are doing life with us. Life change happens in the context of relationship. And if you're discouraged, and if you feel like you want to give up and throw in the towel and just blend in and do life your own way or just be just like everyone else, if you're experiencing that kind of discouragement, I would encourage you, dive deeper into Christian community. Get involved in a local life-giving, Jesus preaching honoring church. Get involved in small group. Get involved in FCA and involved in discipleship groups, and be intentional about finding other Christian friends so that you know that you're not alone. The Apostle Paul constantly endured persecution in an extreme kind of way because of his faith in Jesus Christ. And here's the funny thing, before he was a follower of Jesus, he was actually persecuting Christians to the point of killing them. Talk about being extreme. He endured persecution as a follower of Christ, but before he became a follower of Christ, he was a persecutor, and he killed Christians. And in his letter to his mentee, Timothy, he writes about being imprisoned, being put in jail because of his faith. And he talks about enduring persecution. And he's stating that every believer should expect the same. Every believer, every follower of Christ should expect to be treated differently in a negative way because of their faith. This is what he says in 2 Timothy 3:12. He says, "Indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted." Living for God, living life in a godly way, living life according to biblical principles and following Jesus invites persecution. It invites persecution because the world finds it strange that we won't participate in sinful activities that everyone else deems to be normal. That we don't participate in sinful activities, and they find it strange that we refuse to do that when everyone else considers those activities to be normal. People will question you. People will bait you. People will mock you. People will misunderstand you because of God's standards that you choose to live by. So there's our first idea, is to expect persecution. And over the next few weeks, I have 8 more points that I'm going to go over. And we're going to talk about praying through it. We're going to talk about what that looks like in a practical way. But today, in every episode, we're going to take 10, 15, max 20 minutes of just tackling a point or two on the subject of responding to persecution in a godly way. So thank you so much for checking out this first episode. I look forward to next week's topic. We'll probably tackle 2 or 3 of these next points on just praying for strength and praying for endurance when it comes to persecution. But have a blessed rest of your week. Happy New Year. We'll see you next week for episode 2 in this second season of Life His Way. God bless you. We'll see you then.